What do you call SEO when it's no longer just about search engines? Relevance engineering, AI search, geo? Garrett Sussman digs into this question and much more. Garrett is the director of marketing at iPullRank and one of the sharpest minds at the intersection of psychology, storytelling, and search. He's also the architect of SEO Week, a conference that feels more like an immersive experience than an industry event. But beneath the vibrant community building and clever branding is a real urgency. The playbook for digital marketing is being rewritten in real time. In this conversation, we unpack how AI is fundamentally reshaping the way users search and how marketers should respond. Garrett talks about the rise of vector embeddings, the threat of cognitive bias in personalized search results, and the problem with terminology itself. Clients don't know what to ask for anymore. He also walks us through the high-stakes choices behind launching SEO Week, including what it takes to turn a podcasting background into a brand platform, and what happens when you realize you might be building the new standard for industry events. Garrett isn't just marketing an agency. He's building a brand inside one, while trying to expand the voice of the agency beyond its founder, Mike King. That tension shows up in everything from internal content strategy to how they scale through thought leadership. I followed Garrett's work for a while, and this episode really captures the clarity and care he brings to conversations that could easily get buried in buzzwords. If you learned something new today, take a second to subscribe to the Page 2 podcast, leave us a rating or review, and let us know what resonated. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay, let's get into it. Welcome to episode 104 of the Page 2 podcast. I'm your host, John Clark, and as always, I'm joined by my partner in crime at Moving Traffic Media, Joe DeVita.
Hi.
I'm really looking forward to today's guest. He's one of the most trusted voices on the intersection of psychology, AI, and search, and he's the director of marketing at iPullRank, so I'm really interested in learning a little bit more about that. Garrett Sussman, welcome to the show.
Hey, John. Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me, guys. I am so excited to talk about this. Love what you guys do, and I've got too many thoughts and too many opinions, so hopefully we can keep it within the time frame.
So that sounds like a perfect podcast guest to me. So I honestly, I regret that this is the first time we're sort of meeting, but I have to say, I really appreciate all the stuff that you're putting out there. Anytime I see a webinar or a podcast, I'm usually tuning in. And I think one of the things that's always refreshing is it's very clear that you have this energy, excitement, maybe even love for this industry. And you've recently stated that the current ecosystem has never been more difficult as a marketer, but also probably the most exciting time. If you could sort of step out of that and say, what's the thing you're most excited about today? What would it be?
I think that we are entering a complete shift in the way that people interact with this technology, and the technology is advancing and the capabilities. I am not a doomer, although I am aware of the awful things that technology can do. But I think as a practitioner, the fact that we can engage with this AI sort of assistant next level experience is an opportunity to, if you are just getting into the field, no practitioner who's been in for 5, 10, 15, 20 years knows what's coming next. So I think the people who are going to experiment and get their hands dirty and learn with all of us have just as much opportunity as anyone who's been doing it for the last 20 or 30 years.
Gosh, I have so many questions about that. In researching your background, you started as a teacher. Just knowing that for a lot of people who might be coming into this industry, maybe even veterans for that matter, and the way that the agency that you're involved with is sort of pushing our industry forward with new terminology, new tactics. Does that sort of teaching background help in what you're doing today?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you called it out. There's a sort of performance bug that I have where it's I just like entertaining and educating and making all of this fun. I am of the philosophy that, it's hard to find a career that you really enjoy and can make money out of and kind of live the best version of yourself. And so I think that in being able to, bring others along and see other people get inspired and then have them build new things. When I'm working with Mike at iPullRank and we're seeing people kind of take these ideas and run with them, that's fun. That's inspirational to me. So to educate and then see other people pay it forward is the name of the game.
I mean, it sort of justifies all the hard work that goes into putting one of these tools or one of these presentations out there, right? Just sort of seeing how people are using it, sort of the motivation to keep it going, as it were.
I mean, nobody knows. Everyone's figuring it out. Nobody has definitive answers right now. And so, who are we to say it's got to be this way? We're just kind of trying to inspire other folks and grow.
Yeah, totally. I want to talk about your day-to-day role. We're definitely going to come back to the AI stuff because I think a lot of fun things to talk about there. So your day-to-day role is super unique, right? You're sort of marketing an agency, but also a celebrity founder-ish. And so how do you distinguish that line? Or is there a line, right? Is it sort of all in one, or do you sort of see certain things that you're pushing or promoting independent of one another? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that you're always going to have, when you have someone who starts a business with a very strong POV, it's great because on the one hand, you have a North Star, but it also, the genetics of the agency kind of trickle down that empowers everyone to really kind of take that initiative and jump on it and follow and build and grow. And so I think it's challenging because you do want to keep up, but it also is fun because you see someone who's doing it and living it. And so in terms of my role, it's this combination of getting Mike's voice out there, nurturing the voices of everyone else at the agency, and trying to build a brand that has the genetics of the founder, but it is also its own thing. Because it's easy to fall into the trap of we are just Mike King, and iPullRank isn't. We have so many different perspectives and opinions and visions, and that's why clients come to us, is because they're not just looking for his voice. They want everybody, because he's only one person. I mean, the
Right.
technology is good, but we are not cloning Mike King. And that's a good thing. It's making sure that everyone can kind of scratch that creative and innovative itch and benefit the people that we work with and partner with.
Totally. It's so interesting. Mike is such a technical guy, and I think a lot of people see him as a technologist, which he certainly is. But a lot of my workings with him early on were totally around content. And you guys obviously do a ton of great content production. Is there anything specific around content that you have really sort of taken from him and applied to what you're doing today?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate, as in my career, just being able to bounce ideas and get insights from him of he's always, not only does he have a strong POV and a technical background, but he literally won Marketer of the Year at Search Engine Land. So
Right.
he always has a marketing eye of how we're doing things, campaigns, but never in a micromanaging or controlling way. He just throws ideas out there. Let's, one thing that's on me, Metahan is this really great SEO who came up with this idea to add, a ChatGPT button to your website. And that's, to basically click a button and go, and it'll kind of send a prompt to ChatGPT and engage with your brand. And Mike's we should do that. He's made ideas of pointing me in the direction of leveraging Notebook LM, which is Google's tool that creates these podcasts, to put individual podcasts on each of our AI search manual chapters. And so you're getting to work with someone. It's like being, to use a sports analogy, but working on a team in the NBA where you have this Steph Curry, or Allen Iverson is a better analogy because we're Philly guys, but that makes everybody better around us. So I think it's never a limit. It's always an expansion, amplification. And when it comes to content, he's a rapper. He's written, he wrote this great blog post on Moz that we're actually gonna redo at some point, all around personas. And he used the Smurf analogy. He's a great content guy. Oh, it's a classic. And that's translated into, our SEO Week conference, which we'll talk about as well. But I don't think he's a polymath. I don't think you can put him into one category and say that's Mike King, but I think that benefits us.
So originally from New Jersey, is that how you became a Philly fan?
Yeah,
Or
actually,
a Pennsylvania
okay.
fan?
No, it is Philly. It's funny. I'm in Central Jersey, which exists. My dad was a Philly fan growing up, collected memorabilia. Like we went to, back when people actually traded baseball cards, my dad had this whole collection downstairs. And I went through this like really brief rebellious phase when I was 10. And I was like, I'm going to be a Yankees fan. Because where we're at, you're either a Mets fan, a Yankees fan, or a Phillies fan in Central Jersey. And so ultimately, I was like, I love my dad, but that's our bonding thing. And so growing up, we went to, all the Phillies games, the Sixers, the Eagles. I'll never forget 2008 going to the World Series where I had to like sneak a camcorder into the actual stadium because, I didn't have an iPhone yet at that point. Big Phillies fan, everything Philly sports.
That's so funny. Central Jersey is actually a thing. I have a bunch of friends who live in Jersey, and there's this constant argument about like where you live and what's your sports. Anyway, different podcast. So we're coming up on about a year of when A16Z sort of proclaimed GEO as the new acronym. And, I think a lot of us in the industry, Mike, yourself, others, we're definitely trying to push us towards something different. Do you have any thoughts on this debate? I mean, there's been so much that we've learned since then about how these models ground results, query fan out, right? All these things that have sort of given more context to what it is we're doing as an acronym. What are your thoughts on this whole debate?
Yeah, it's a super controversial topic in our industry. And I don't know if it'll ever be fully resolved. I think that you can frame this. Ultimately, it's a semantic conversation. What I call, what you call, we call it. Like, it's not just SEO. And that's been a theme of everything that we're doing. Whether we're talking about the complexity of the strategy, aspects of the tactics, there's absolutely a ton of overlap. Mike reframed it. His framework, which I agree with, is relevance engineering, that everything is so much more holistic. I think the point of the debate and why it's important is when you are in-house or an agency and you consider yourself an SEO, for the longest time, the SEOs have been having to clean up a lot of digital garbage on the internet. Mike has claimed that, we have been like the janitors of the SEO. Like, why do we have to focus on open graph, social media descriptions when that isn't exactly SEO? And as AI search kind of touches everything and pulls from everywhere, there's the reality that what SEOs do, they're prime positioned to kind of orchestrate all of digital marketing, and SEOs don't get paid what they should. They don't get paid the same as brands. They don't get paid the same as the ad folks in marketing. So whatever we call this next version, this channel, deserves to get paid what they're worth. And so I think the idea of that it's not just SEO is this opportunity to say, hey, we're doing a lot more to drive revenue for your $100,000 million, $1 billion business. SEO doesn't have the reputation that it deserves. Now, there's a lot that we do that is still SEO in terms of, visibility in a search platform. But I'd be hard pressed to say that it's not significantly more than that. And we can go into the whys, but it's not just SEO.
Yeah, I think it's, at least for me, it's become more frustrating. Like Joe and I were in a pitch earlier this week, and a big topic was...
and I get this question from clients all the time. Can you help us with AI search? And they don't know what to call it. They don't know. It feels like we do a lot of education. We have a lot of SEO clients, and we're giving them we're calling it AEO, but they'll call it something different. They don't know what to ask for. I feel like coming together on what we're going to call it might help drive the business forward, because clients who pay for the service will know what to ask for.
It's such a good point, Joe. To your point about the A16Z is that like they gave us a name that a lot of high-level C-suite brands would say, okay, this is an authority who's coined a GEO. Let's all jump on that, because we do the same thing. Like, we call it relevance engineering. We think GEO and SEOs are sub-layers of that. But you find yourself navigating because you want to be able to speak the same language. When someone comes in, they're like, yeah, AEO, AI search. And there is practical nuance differences to it. Like, if we're talking about being visible in ChatGPT for a query that isn't actually going out to the web and is just using its training data, is that a fundamentally different thing than using ChatGPT that does reach out and uses retrieval augmented generation. And should we consider it the same thing? Because there's nuanced differences. So I think it's a real problem. And I don't even think that we're out of it at this point. I consistently am changing the words. I had the same issue actually before I went to iPullRank, I was working in local SEO, and I was working for SaaS software that did online review management. It helps small businesses get reviews. Now, historically in that industry, they called it reputation management, but there was a difference between someone who, a CEO who got thrown in jail for fraud and you need to scrub his name from the SERPs as managing his reputation versus a proactive, positive, I just want to get 5-star reviews for my business because it will help me in local SEO. And so you find yourself in these situations where, I don't want to get confused with reputation management. We're going to call it review management, but to get everyone on the same page is not easy. And I don't know how the dust will settle with all of this because everything's changing so much. When 2022 wasn't as much retrieval augmented generation with ChatGPT, it was just the training data and it was something different. Now the lines are so blurred. So I'm still as lost as you guys are, but we call it relevance engineering. We can adapt to use the same words that you are, GEO, AI search. I like AI search. I like relevance engineering. But opening up a can of worms, John, how dare you?
It was early enough in the podcast. I figured we'd have enough time to dig into it. Yeah, I think it's just frustrating not to know how to reference it. And I think in SEO in general, right, there's been this sort of like training curve where, there's a big component of client education that sort of goes along with what we do. And that level of education just got like 10 times harder, right? Because trying to help someone understand the difference between a query that is returned off the training data versus retrieval, right? Like that's a very nuanced concept. And so it's
Every time John says cosine similarity, I see eyes glaze over.
It's true.
Maybe that's a good segue, a very loose segue to Mike at one time mentioned this idea of creating an embedding index of the web. We've been doing, or at least trying to do a lot more with, translating content into embeddings and trying to understand cosine similarities and, how keywords align with those chunks, which we can talk about in a second as well. But have you convinced anyone to start that embedding index at all? Or are you building it yourself?
I was going to say nothing's imminent, but there are, behind closed doors, things happening. What's really fascinating about the embedding situation is like, in a lot of ways, it's problematic. And this kind of leads into some of the psychology aspects of things where when we're talking about embeddings, we're talking about mathematical values for words and how they're all semantically related to each other. And different databases matter because we are also embedding our own cultural biases within the mathematics. And so, what Google uses versus what potentially ChatGPT uses or any of these other models impacts relevance. One book I read recently, it's called The Alignment Problem by Brian Christensen, which I highly recommend, written in 2020. It brings up this idea that like, we know the classic example of when you're looking at vector embeddings that man to woman, king to queen, you place these on a 3D graph and you can actually see how they're related. But when you go down a rabbit hole, the embeddings are a problem because you might look at like man to woman, doctor to nurse. Okay, well, all of a sudden we're seeing some gender biases, or it's really messed up. Some of the older ones of like computer scientist versus housewife. And like that was the case. And so it's important to how do we create a vector embeddings database that reflects a certain cultural value that can be universal. And I think that's something, and it goes into some of these psychological aspects of SEO that we need to consider whenever we're trying to optimize for Google, for ChatGPT, is there's like an editorial nature to how all of this works. So my warning is just that when we're thinking about cosine similarity, that is how the machines, the algorithms, the LLMs operate. But we need to consider of like, how are we determining the values of these words in the first place? and how are we going to enter that ecosystem is a risk and a consideration for marketers.
Are you doing anything on the iPull rank side to mitigate for that at all in the tools that you're building? Or is that sort of like the existential question, right?
It's an existential question, but it's also, I think there is something to be said for working within the ecosystems that you like these different walled gardens. Google is still a walled garden. And so as they implement, more LMs, whether it's Gemini or AI overviews, you have to work within the vector embedding databases that they're using. So that's usually a starting point, whether it's like, Vertex. We do like mixed spread, but I think that it hasn't been completely an issue yet in terms of performance and what we're doing in-house. But yeah, we do build out our own proprietary evaluation functions based on these vector embedding models.
Got it. Okay. Well, maybe we can touch on the psychology side a little bit. Is there, when you look across the ecosystem of SEOs, is there any sort of cognitive bias that you see sort of across our industry that maybe is different than maybe that existential bias?
Yeah. So I definitely believe that there is different biases at play when we're talking about search. The hard reality and the strongest bias is in confirmation bias. We have on the one hand, you have Google, which is biased towards bigger brands. And that's historically been the case. And it makes sense because they want to reflect the real world, right? Like if I'm looking for a shoe brand, it makes sense that you would recommend the brands that I'm most likely to want to purchase. And that's most popular around everyone because then I would come away with a satisfying intent. If you just gave me like 15 random brands, I have to do that much more work to find the brand that I'm looking for, that wouldn't be great. The other side of the bias equation is the way that we actually phrase our searches can influence the output too. My classic example is your money, your life. So health related searches are always really controversial. Yep. If I'm a big coffee drinker. And my mom is always concerned that I drink too much coffee, right? She's like, Garrett, you drink too much coffee. You got to cut down. And if I go to Google and I search for, is coffee healthy for you? I will get a certain type of result. If my mother goes and says, is coffee bad for you? She'll get a certain type of result. A lot of times those results will confirm the way that we phrase it. Google's kind of done its best to mitigate that and giving you like kind of, conservative answers that don't go extreme one way or the other. But once we start to get into AI search, that does get exacerbated. And that's the issue that a lot of SEOs have to address now, is this fact that we're getting extremely personalized search that responds to our confirmation bias, but it's also responds to the context that we bring to the search in the first place. And that's we just heard, for instance, Google announced a hyper level of personalization that will pull in Gmail, obviously already pulls in your location, the device you're using, and your search history. But all these aspects are going to put us further and further into our own bias filter bubbles, which, historically Google's come and they said, oh, we're not biased. We're not putting you into a filter bubble, but that feels inevitable by the way that they're building these things.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you sort of wonder, like, does that bubble ever stop? Because the more you reinforce it with your own sort of behaviors and documents and email and conversation, like, how do you ever get outside of it if you allow Google access to all of those things as part of this new personalization feature?
You can. I mean, it improves the product. I mean, I would challenge everybody to go and turn off any sort of tracking mechanisms. You can do it right now, just going to like incognito for something that's really personal to you and see the results for, a anonymous search versus a personalized search. And it's not even as good as it's going to be. I think everyone going forward is going to have a choice to whether, sacrifice data privacy and engage in all of this to get a better product. And I would guess, I mean, you're hearing conversations about people saying there's a backlash and people, don't want to engage in this tech, but I would guess like 9 out of 10 people are happy to sacrifice their data privacy for an easier, better experience. And one thing I'm experiencing firsthand is, for instance, people right now are having to decide if they're using AI, and AI is controversial in its own right. Like, are you using ChatGPT? Are you using Claude? Are you using Gemini? The memory and the personalization that's already existing by your usage there is making it super sticky. Like right now,
Right.
I'm a ChatGPT user. And I enjoy using ChatGPT because I've invested so much back and forth that it knows me better, that I get better results of what I'm looking for, whether it's, for marketing or actual search. But I'm debating whether or not to move over to Google and use Gemini more because my gut instinct is saying, like, in the long run, I trust that Google will have a better roadmap and a better product. And so maybe I should start investing more of my efforts in using their products because they have so much data. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Whoever you choose, it's like, what's the lesser of two evils? But I think a lot of people are going to have to, if you're an Apple person versus an Android person, like everyone's making that decision more and more these days.
Right. Yeah, I've always, there's always been the comment of, like Google's invading your privacy and all those sorts of things. I've always thought about the web as like the transaction is you're giving them your cookies to remarket you, and therefore, the web is essentially free. I've always thought that exchange of value was quite reasonable. So yeah, I guess if it becomes more personalized, maybe it will be a even better experience. And I'm wondering, Apple just announced that they've chosen Gemini. I think early news was that it was going to be ChatGPT, but it sounds like they've sort of landed on Gemini, which further integrates Google into their ecosystem. And I'm thinking back to when ChatGPT first launched, it was like, oh my God, Google's going to die. It's the end of Google. And they have come back stronger than ever. I'm definitely finding myself using their products a lot more. Do you have any thoughts on how this ecosystem will continue to flush out? I think search traffic or referral traffic from LLMs is still very minimal in comparison to Google. Do you see that changing at all in the future, or is Google just sort of going to run away with this thing?
I don't think it's going to change. My big caveat, which is that in 2020, we had the antitrust trial of the DOJ against Google for being a monopoly. And that was an opportunity to do something drastic. I don't think anybody would argue that Google's not a monopoly. The scary thing with them at this point is they're almost too big to fail. They become such a part of our daily life that you almost can't pull them apart without breaking everything. It feels like, you take the AT&T monopoly cases from, now 30, 40 years ago. I'm feeling old as hell, but I don't think you can even do that in the same way for Google. It's scary. So obviously, I don't think any brand, any business can last forever, but without a government intervention or significant self-inflicted wounds, I don't think it's going to change. I think that Google, I give them a lot of credit to your point of them making a comeback, is they had their Netflix blockbuster moment where, I am skeptical that they are able to maintain the same amount of ad revenue through AI search as they have from traditional search. And maybe they will figure it out, like to continue to juice more money out of all of us. You always have to ask, like, when Google makes decisions, how are they ultimately doing it in the context of the revenue because they're a business? But I do give them a lot of credit of they are moving us towards a future that feels inevitable of AI search being the default version of search. Like you've seen a lot of people predict of over the next 6 to 12 months, the traditional, the 10 blue links hasn't been a thing for a minute with all the various features, and they've gotten AI overviews into the search results. But it feels inevitable over the next 6 to 12 months that they will replace AI search with, or traditional search with, an AI search version. I don't know what that means for ad revenue, but they're not just burying their head in the sand like BlackBerry or Blockbuster. They're moving forward. Whether they make the right decisions or not is debatable, but they're not just abdicating to OpenAI, and I give them a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, totally. Well, I guess if we think about AI mode or even AI answers, AI overviews for that matter, there's been a lot of discussion around query fan out, which is one of the new acronyms in our industry. maybe not so new anymore. And there's so many, I guess what you could call like silent queries that we never necessarily see typed or get returned in Google Search Console, for example. How are you guys thinking about tackling that sort of thing? Are you looking at it as a data point for your own content creation, or are you really more applying that to what you're doing for clients?
Both. I think that when you think about query fan out, it goes hand in hand with and Joe, you mentioned this about like educating, clients or anyone. We're having to kind of shift up the paradigms of how we think about it as a channel. As you were saying, John, like about whether the traffic will come back or not. The first part of this conversation is the fact of like, even if you're not getting traffic, the need to search isn't going to change. People are going to need information. And so if it's not driving traffic that you can control to your site, it's still a valuable channel to be visible to brands or to be visible to consumers. And so even if that value equation changes, how do we need to think about the value of the visibility in an AI generated answer? Whether that is just being a recommended brand, if someone's at the bottom of the funnel looking for a product or a service, or being the brand that does get somehow incorporated through citations into the results, like where are you going to focus your efforts? And so that comes back to the query fan out, which is however people's searches are changing, you want to give yourself as many opportunities as possible to either be cited or recommended in those AI answers. And so you need to be thinking about when someone goes for a search, and whether it's ChatGPT or AI Overviews AI Mode generates 20, 30 synthetic queries, each of those synthetic queries in the fan out is an opportunity to have your content, your brand be pulled in to the answer. And so when you aren't satisfying those with content on your site, but not even just your site, we have a more of an omni-channel perspective. Like, are you showing up in Reddit if Reddit's being pulled in? Are you showing up in YouTube if YouTube's being pulled in? Are you giving yourself as many, Mike references as like raffle tickets, as many raffle tickets as possible to be pulled into that answer? Because it's also not deterministic in the sense of these answers that people are encountering is different every time. And it's different for every person. Like you, John, you, Joe, you and I, we're all getting different answers. As a brand, if you want to participate, you almost have to create more granular content than you ever had before to give yourself those opportunities. Going back to the original thing of why this is such a fun opportunity to get into this industry now is it changes your strategy. It completely changes the way that you want to approach the channel and what your goals are, whether you are a local brand, an e-commerce brand, a Fortune 500 enterprise brand, an individual. Everyone needs to think about this differently. And so, yeah, that influences the way we communicate that to our clients and the content we create or the strategy we recommend, but also for ourselves and how we're thinking about the industry.
I think every good marketer knows they need to diversify their acquisition channels. I think a really good marketer understands they may have to lose a little money testing into a new one. And that's where we are right now, where we don't have a playbook for you that's going to guarantee you results in 6 to 12 months. But we're saying, if you can invest this much money, here's the approach we'll take for you.
It's so true. And it goes to like this issue with our industry where it's like we want these best practices, these benchmarks, this thing that will apply to everyone. But as much as AI search is being personalized, a business's approach needs to be personalized as well. To your point, Joe, it's like if you're going to invest, you need to know what channels matter to your business. It's hard to be everything to everyone. It's a lot more effective revenue-wise to zero in and focus on what's going to move the needle, the revenue, who your ideal audience is, and then grow out from there.
I think SparkToro is such an underutilized tool for SEOs for exactly that reason. I think their audience insight data is second to none. And if you're looking for new channels to go after, it's really eye-opening if you dig into the data a little bit and just play around with it. We had Rand on for our 100th episode, and I admitted that I hadn't used the tool much in years past, but it's awesome. So I think to your point, just finding those audiences is the holy grail.
Well, it's like market research is really, really hard too. So anything that can at least point you directionally is really useful because we ran this UX AI mode study back over the summer when it came out. And what was interesting is we did these like real qualitative interviews with people to see what they thought about AI mode, how they would approach it, what they would use. People are wild. People do not search the way that you think they're going to search. And data is really tricky in that respect, in that everything can lead you in the right direction. But when you get to an individual level, like you can not predict the way, like someone will use TikTok for all of their searches. Some person will only look at Reddit threads, for what matters to them. So much is contextual about the way that you search to buy a car versus the way that you find a doctor versus the way that you order pizza locally. Every search is so specific to the type of search and the individual that you need. And this is why I don't think we can replace marketers with AI yet, is like you need someone with critical thinking who can do the research, who knows the questions to ask to understand their specific audience and get a generalized sense of how they are searching and thinking about things to then build a very personalized strategy. AI will get there. I am bullish on the fact of like 10 years from now, our jobs will all be obsolete and we'll be listening to AI podcasts. Sorry, guys. I know I'll shut down my podcast too. But like right now, people like smart marketers are hard to come by who can connect all of these important dots.
You said yet in terms of marketers being replaced, and I was going to ask you about that, and then you sort of said, yeah, I believe it's going to happen. What do you think is like, what's the tipping point? Like what needs to happen for that to become a reality? I don't know necessarily what I believe. I mean, just the way AI is moving, it feels inevitable, but is it 10 year, 20? I don't know. Like what is, and I don't know that I can put my finger on that one thing that would make it a reality. You know what I mean? Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah. I mean, so it's funny. Another book I recently read was Talib's Black Swan, which is this idea of nobody can really predict the future. Like we don't know what we don't know and we have no control over it. I think you can get, hey, if you want, we could do a whole other like deeply philosophical podcast is one aspect. I think there's a political, macroeconomics approach to all of this. And then there is the actual AI technology, which is we don't know if we are, at a point of a AI winter, the idea of hitting a ceiling where the technology is limited and won't continue to grow, like Moore's law, where, computer chips get faster and cheaper and smaller. I feel like it is inevitable, but I also wouldn't be surprised if, we have a cultural backlash and people are over it. And, from one political administration to another, there's like significant penalties that create more competition and more technology advancements versus like, I don't know if you've ever read Cory Doctorow's enshittification papers in his book, but like, his idea is that we are going down a mountain crash course for just the, big tech, if you will, kind of just putting us all in some sort of chicken cage. So you asked, we can open up a philosophical box, but the optimist in me says that I would love to see a future where we are not limited by technology, that our creativity allows us to pursue whatever we want and whatever we can come up with can be created with this tech. That's what I want to see in the next 5 to 10 years. So the question isn't necessarily about whether or not we'll be replaced, but the question is, what can you do with this technology to live the most fulfilling life? And that's my hope.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even know how we transition out of that one, but let's, well, I definitely want to spend some time talking about SEO week because it's an awesome conference. I was really disappointed to miss it last year. Really hopeful I can join this year, but take us behind the scenes of that. So have you ever run anything of that scale before?
No, it was nuts. It was nuts. It was a achievement in a career. For those of you who don't have any context, SEO Week we had this inaugural conference in New York. Mike had a really great vision. It came from the year before of him and Aleda Solis and Lily Ray being like, we don't have enough great conferences in New York that represent the SEO industry. In fact, since COVID, we just need a bigger, better, different conference. There's some great ones out there, like Brighton's great and MozCon are great, but we need something with a little Mike King, iPull Rank flavor. And so we said, okay, we're going to do this 4 days in New York City, all focused on the future of SEO, because we also had that vibe that things were changing significantly in the context of AI search. So, going into late 2024, we started to put the pieces together. We brought on Charlene Cade of CK Events, who's fantastic, who has experience running an event. And so I was running the marketing of everything. And gosh, it's like with any of these events, it's like you get these moments of fear of like, is anybody going to show up for this thing? Like, we're doing all the marketing. We're getting the word out there. Who's to believe us that, Mike King, iPull Rank, and Garrett, that we're all going to pull this off? And I would say, and there were people who were 6 weeks out being like, if you hadn't sold a majority of the tickets, you're screwed. Like, you're going to have this empty. And, my reputation's on the line. I didn't want Mike to go up there to this empty room and just like say nothing to nobody or say everything to nobody. And so we started to get the momentum. We ran a lot of podcasts. We got all these amazing speakers. We put together a website and the ticket sales started to happen. And we're like, holy crap, we are doing this. And then you get to the actual event. And this was like, late April last year. And when you're actually there, you expect that Murphy's Law, that anything can go wrong will. Right. Guys, it did not happen. Like, there were no, I'm going to knock on wood because we're doing it again this year and I'm going to jinx myself, but like nothing went wrong. Like nothing really big. I would say at one point so it's a funny story. Everyone's sitting in this room. We got these plastic chairs. We had heard a couple of people being like, the chairs aren't that comfortable. And so it gets back to Mike, and he goes up halfway through the conference and he's like, guys, everyone in the audience, how do you feel about your chairs? Are these crappy chairs? And you hear murmurs or whatever. He's like, tomorrow you're going to have new chairs. Literally, me and Mike and Charlene we're getting people on the call, and Charlene had brand new chairs the next day that were so much more comfortable. Like, that was the extent of our big hurrah. I mean, we had Busta Rhymes was the performer, along with Mike, and Lily Ray was DJing for our Algorithms After Party event. And the whole thing was special. It was really cool. We had these like motion graphics. We had all the speakers were able to have their own custom motion graphics design. And the feedback afterwards, the vibe, as the kids say, the vibes were immaculate. It was a great vibe coming out of it, and it felt successful. All the content you couldn't get it anywhere else. It wasn't advanced. There was some stuff that I'm like, what are you talking? But like, it wasn't beginners either. It was, here are the people at the precipice of a changing industry that's going from SEO to AI search to relevance engineering. And here's where you're learning about what's coming next. And like, Lily was there, Ram was there, and Aleda was there, and Will Reynolds was there, and Ross Simmons, like who's who. It was awesome. And so, yeah, we're doing it again. We're in that. I have that same pit in my stomach right now. Fortunately, we're already sold a ton of tickets because we learned at the end of that to be like, okay, if you want your early bird tickets for next year, right, get them now. So, we're not starting at ground zero, but still there's a lot of time between now and April.
I'm curious. So, I visited the site. I go to Facebook or Instagram later. I get an ad. You guys are known more for like an SEO agency. Were you running the ads yourself, or did you work with a contractor? Like, how did you take us behind the scenes of like marketing that thing, and maybe what you learned from the first one to now?
Trying everything, to Joe's point about not focusing on like one channel. So, we ran ads. I worked with a contractor who was fantastic. Her name is Ketley. She's amazing. She's worked with like Arij over at the Women in Tech SEO community, getting the messaging out. We built a brand from scratch. We worked with a bunch of communities, ran some contests for some tickets. We're doing the same thing this year with like Noah Lerner and the SEO community Slack channel, Superpath awesome. With Jimmy Daly. I love that community. Those guys are great. We did email marketing with like Search Engine Land's newsletter. We did like part of the initiative was podcast interviews with all of the speakers to hype up what they're going to be talking about. Like we tried everything, and it is very tricky to, in a world of like not cookieless, but like attribution's hard. that I think it all contributed. Mike literally went on an SEO road trip where he hit up 7 different cities and gave many, educational talks around relevance engineering, the Google leaks, Corey Fanout, what he was like learning about in SGE at the time to get the words out. That's how there are a few people in Chicago. We connected with like Jory Ford and she ended up speaking and a bunch of people there. So we definitely tried everything. And it's hard to say what was the reason. And there's a lot of lessons learned too. I hired 3 people on my team in late February. Before that, it was just me and Mike and Charlene. So I brought on my team. They did a fantastic job of building the brand and getting all like the print deliverables for the actual event. There's so much. It's hard to like articulate exactly what we're.
Well, I think one of the things that was really awesome to see was how you took all the content from the conference and sort of applied that to the things that you're preaching every day, right? So, releasing a speaker deck, I think it was once a day for like 2 weeks or something like that. And, repurposing that content across the blog and all those sorts of things. I guess, how were you thinking about reusing that content initially? Did all this sort of come out after the conference was done and you're like, okay, now we got all this content, what do we do with it? Or was that sort of baked into that whole planning process as well? Because I can imagine when you're into the planning for the conference itself, you're not necessarily thinking about post-conference, right? So how did all that come together?
It was a combination. We know we are going to get a ton of great stuff out of this. When we did it and how we did it, there was some, building the play in the air. But, the entire time, I swear I have like Ross Simmons in the back of my head being like, create once, distribute forever. And so I don't know about your guys' own content consumption, but it's so hard to pay attention. It's so hard I miss a week of LinkedIn and I'm like, what the heck is going on in our industry? Like, especially now with AI search, there's so much new stuff going on. There's so many different opinions happening. So we knew that we were sitting on a gold mine of content that we wanted to share. Part of it was building community, I think there is a fact of like the people who invested so much in our conference, we wanted to get their content out there and share it and leverage it on the site. And then also, it's a great opportunity of brand awareness for iPull Rank. I would say there are a lot of different clients who, for anyone, running a conference for your agency is not for the weak of heart, but I think there is a lot of value in doing that and being visible in the industry and coming from a perspective of like good intentions, but also at the end of the day, we all want to generate revenue, grow bigger, do more good things. Easier said than done.
For sure. I mean, definitely sounds like, I don't know. Oftentimes when you do something with goodwill, like a lot of that stuff just naturally follows. And I think that is maybe a testament to what you guys try to do here.
I hope so. I mean, we are a polarizing agency at the same time because it's like I have strong opinions that I'm not, gonna hold back on. Mike has strong opinions. Like we feel confidently. I feel, the philosophy of like carry strong opinions, but be open to change your opinions with new information. But the heart of our agency is like good people who care. Like the whole argument about like, what do we call SEO doesn't come from a place of wanting to be right. It doesn't come from a place of wanting to have legacy. It fundamentally comes from a place of like, we are surrounded by good people who work hard to get visibility from their brands and deserve to get paid. And we want the industry to get paid. Like we want people to get validation and be able to support their families and their livelihood doing, the way we started. I care about this. This is fun. Search is awesome, but we should get paid doing it.
Totally. All right. We've got a couple minutes left with you. Let's jump to some rapid fire if that works for you.
Bring it. Let's do it.
You host a lot of podcasts, conversations, webinars. What's the one question you wish people would ask more often?
Oh man, how do you search? I love the psychology. I just want to know get inside your head of like what is your go-tos? Where do you search and how do you think about search in the grand scheme of things.
That's a really good one. What's the most underrated cognitive bias in marketing today?
It's the biggest, but also underrated. So I'm still going to say is confirmation bias. I don't think we are aware enough of the way that we phrase our searches influences the outcomes and shouldn't be surprised by it.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be more cognizant of it myself, just sort of seeing what the differences are, trying to test some of that stuff out. Good, Joe.
I know you have one young daughter at home. Is that right?
Yes.
Is there a work-life balance rule you try never to break?
That's a really good question. I need to get better at it. I need to be present and turn off the notifications when work is over. That is one of the things that I am so thankful for at iPullRank is like when I'm off the clock, it's respected. You know, we all understand that we'll send messages and that you'll get to it at a given time, but I think we have a really good work-life balance here. And I always try to maintain that one when I'm with her.
Yeah, that's so tough, right? So important, though. If you could only use one SEO tool for the rest of the year, what would it be?
Aside from the ones that we use in-house that I am not sharing with any of y'all, this might be controversial, but I'm gonna say ChatGPT or your LLM of choice. Not necessarily for data extraction, for organizing my own thoughts, bouncing ideas off of, and polishing, whatever content I'm creating.
Awesome. You've recommended a couple of good books for us already, but is there a non-SEO book that everybody should read?
I would say my all-time favorite is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. It's epic. It's all about the fact that your brain, he's a behavioral economist, passed away, somewhat recently last year, but he created this concept of that we are irrational, that we have two brains. We have a systems one that's impulsive and emotional, and systems two that is very much rational. And we tend to go towards system one more often than not. And so understanding the psychology between what part of our brain are we using on any given day decisions that we're making, and the fact that also we are significantly influenced by loss aversion. People are generally don't want to lose stuff. So you always got to take that into consideration. It's such a good book, Psychology and the Way People.
Somebody recommended that to me a long time ago. It's been on my list forever. I think maybe
Joe
now I'm
knows.
going to actually read it.
Read it.
It's sitting in your basement. It's probably right behind you.
Probably true. Well, Garrett, this has been awesome. Let our listeners know where they can find you.
Yeah, I've become a LinkedIn guy. I was a Twitter guy. I still use Twitter for consumption, but in terms of like participating, let's connect on LinkedIn because that's where I feel like the best of our community exists at this point.
Yep, agreed. Well, thanks again for joining us on the Page 2 podcast and really bringing so much authenticity to the conversation. Really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to the next time we have the chance to chat.
Well, it'll be in New York at SEO Week in April. But
That's right.
Thanks guys for having me. You guys are the best at what you do. I love the podcast and it's really a privilege to be on here with y'all.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And for the listeners, if you enjoyed the show, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.